She didn't call a cab. She didn't cancel. She laced up her only good heels, looked at her 2 sleeping babies, and walked out into the worst storm of the year. 6 miles. No umbrella. No backup plan. What she didn't know was that the most powerful man in the city was parked outside that building, watching every single step she took. Hey besties. Welcome back to another irresistible mafia romance story. I missed you. Before we dive in, tell me in the comment where you're watching from. I love seeing how far my girls are. And if you're new here, don't forget to like, share with your friends, and subscribe. Stay with me, because these stories? They only get crazier. Maya Jenkins was 32 years old, and life had not been kind to her. Not recently anyway. 7 months without a paycheck. A landlord who had already knocked twice that week. 2 kids, Jalen, 9, and little Chloe, 6, who deserved so much more than she could give them right now. And a car that died on a Thursday evening like it simply gave up, the same way her ex-husband had 3 years before. But Maya didn't give up. The night before the interview she sat at her kitchen table past midnight, ironing her one good blazer with a towel underneath because the ironing board had a broken leg. She printed 3 copies of her resume, slid them into a clear plastic bag, and rehearsed her answers in front of the cracked bathroom mirror until her voice stopped shaking. Then she checked the weather. Rain. Heavy. All morning. She checked the distance next. 6.2 miles. She stared at that screen for a long time. Then she set her alarm, turned off the light, and went to bed. What kind of woman does that? What kind of mother, exhausted and broke and running on nothing but hope, sets her alarm and goes to sleep knowing what's waiting for her in the morning? The kind who has children counting on her. The kind who has already survived worse. The kind the world keeps underestimating. Her mother arrived at 6:15, took one look at Maya in her damp blazer and heels, and grabbed her arm. Maya. You are not walking 6 miles in this rain. Call them. Reschedule. This is the 3rd callback I've gotten in 7 months, Mama. Then take my umbrella at least. The wind will destroy it in 5 minutes. Her mother had no answer for that, because it was true. Maya kissed Jalen on the forehead. Chloe was still half asleep, but she pressed something into Maya's hand, a small folded piece of paper. Maya opened it carefully. A crayon drawing. A woman in a suit, stick figure straight, with the words "Mommy will get the job" written in the shakiest, most beautiful handwriting she had ever seen. Something cracked open in Maya's chest. She folded it once, tucked it into her blazer pocket, directly over her heart, and walked out the door. The rain hit her instantly. Cold, relentless, and absolutely indifferent to her situation. Her umbrella lasted exactly 1 block before the wind ripped it inside out and bent it beyond saving. She dropped it in a trash can without breaking her stride. By mile 2 her heels were rubbing raw. By mile 3 her blazer was soaked through. Cars splashed past her, close enough that the water hit her legs. Not one of them slowed down. She kept walking. Halfway there she ducked under the awning of a pharmacy, breathing hard. She caught her reflection in the glass door and almost didn't recognize herself. Mascara running. Hair matted flat. Looking nothing like the woman she had rehearsed being the night before. She went inside. Asked the cashier quietly for a few paper towels. Found the restroom in the back. Cleaned her face with steady hands. Smoothed her hair as best she could. Checked her resume, still dry inside the plastic bag. She had planned for that, at least. She looked at herself in that narrow bathroom mirror for a long, quiet moment. Then she reached into her blazer pocket and touched the folded crayon drawing. Mommy will get the job. She straightened her collar, lifted her chin, and walked back out into the rain. Now here is where the story takes a turn nobody saw coming. Because while Maya was fighting her way through that storm, someone else was having a very different kind of morning. David Harrington, 54 years old, CEO of Harrington Logistics, a man who had turned a 2-truck delivery operation into a $40 million company, was sitting in his car in the executive parking lot, losing a very important phone call. His operations director had just told him that their biggest client, a regional retail chain responsible for 30% of their annual revenue, was quietly in talks with a competitor. David was pressing his fingers to his temple, trying to stay calm, when something outside the rain-blurred window made him stop. A woman. Walking through the storm. Alone. Drenched to the bone. But she wasn't stumbling. Wasn't rushing in a frantic, desperate way. She was walking with a kind of quiet, furious purpose that he hadn't seen in a very long time. Like the rain wasn't even a factor. Like she had already decided how this day was going to end. David went completely still. His operations director was still talking. David wasn't listening anymore. The woman reached the entrance of the building. She stopped just outside the doors. Set her bag down. Wrung the water slowly from each sleeve. Wiped her face. Pulled out a small compact mirror from her bag and fixed herself up in the cold and the wind. Then she stood up straight. Rolled her shoulders back. Took one long, slow breath. And walked through that door like she had an appointment with destiny. David sat in his car for 5 full seconds, not moving. Then he ended the call, stepped out into the rain himself, and followed her inside. What he did next, nobody in that building expected. Not Sandra, the hiring manager. Not the receptionist. Not even his own assistant. And Maya Jenkins had absolutely no idea what was coming. Sandra Mitchell had been hiring for Harrington Logistics for 11 years. She had interviewed hundreds of candidates in that little third-floor conference room. She knew within the first 60 seconds whether someone was worth her time. She was checking her watch when Maya walked in. And Sandra, a woman not easily impressed, looked up and felt something shift. Because Maya Jenkins walked into that room like she hadn't just survived 6 miles of a rainstorm. She walked in like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Wet blazer. Damp hair. Chin up. Eyes clear. Folder placed on the table with quiet precision. Maya Jenkins, she said, extending her hand. Thank you for having me. Sandra shook it, noticed the cold of her fingers, glanced at the window at the storm outside, and said nothing. But she made a small note on her pad. What Sandra didn't notice immediately was the man who had slipped silently into the back corner of the room. David Harrington sat down, said nothing, and gave Sandra a single nod that meant, pretend I'm not here. Sandra blinked once. Adjusted her pen. And began. Tell me about yourself, Maya. Maya didn't fumble. Didn't over-explain. She gave Sandra 2 minutes, tight and sharp, where she'd worked, what she'd built, what she was good at. Then she stopped. Sandra leaned forward slightly. You've had a 7-month employment gap. Help me understand that. A lesser person would have flinched. Would have stumbled over an excuse. Maya looked Sandra directly in the eye. I'm a single mother of 2. My youngest had a health scare last year that required consistent care for 4 months. I made a choice. I'd make it again. But I'm here now, I'm ready, and I don't intend to waste whatever opportunity this becomes. Silence. In the back corner, David hadn't moved. Sandra flipped to the next question. Why Harrington Logistics specifically? We're not the biggest name in this space. Maya reached into her folder and placed 3 pages on the table, typed, front and back, covered in highlights and margin notes. Because you're not chasing scale for the sake of it. Your last 2 annual reports show a company that's building infrastructure before it expands. That's rare. Most logistics companies grow fast and break. You're doing it differently. I want to be part of something being built correctly. Sandra stared at the pages. David, in the back of the room, quietly uncrossed his arms. The interview continued for 20 more minutes. Every answer Maya gave was clean, confident, and completely unrehearsed sounding despite being deeply prepared. She was the kind of candidate you meet once every few years, the kind that makes you feel like you're the lucky one in the room. When it ended, Maya stood, shook Sandra's hand again, thanked her warmly, and walked out. The door clicked shut. David leaned forward immediately. Sandra. Who is she? Sandra slid the resume across the table without a word. David read it. Both pages. Slowly. How did she get here today? Did she drive? Sandra frowned. I'm not sure. I can check with reception. She walked, David said quietly. In that storm. I watched her from the parking lot. He set the resume down. Whatever offer you were preparing, double it. And I want a company car in her name by the end of the week. Sandra opened her mouth. And Sandra. He was already standing. Don't tell her why. Not yet. He walked out. Now here is where the story stops being just an inspiring interview story. Because 3 days later, Maya got the call. The offer was so far above what she expected that she asked Sandra to repeat the number twice. She accepted before she even hung up, hand pressed flat against her kitchen counter to keep herself steady. She started the following Monday. What she didn't know, what nobody told her, was that David Harrington had done something he had never done in 26 years of running that company. He had personally reviewed her onboarding file. Had quietly ensured she was placed on the highest visibility projects in her first month. Was watching, not in a predatory way, but in the way that a man recognizes something rare and refuses to let it disappear into the noise. But David had a secret of his own. One that his board of directors didn't know. One that his company's PR team didn't know. One that would, within 60 days, threaten to unravel everything Maya had just walked into. Harrington Logistics was in serious trouble. That phone call in the parking lot, the one he had ended to watch Maya walk through the door, that had been his operations director delivering news David had been quietly dreading for months. Their anchor client was gone. Not in talks with a competitor. Gone. The contract had been signed the night before. 30% of their revenue. Vanished. David had told nobody yet. And now there was a brilliant, hungry, desperately hopeful woman sitting 2 floors below him. A woman who had walked 6 miles in the rain for a job that might not exist in 90 days. He stood at his office window, looking down at the parking lot, at the empty space where he had watched her appear through the rain. Then something happened that changed his calculations completely. His assistant knocked once and opened the door. "Mr. Harrington. There's a woman at reception. She doesn't have an appointment." A pause. "She says she's your wife." David turned from the window very slowly. "I don't have a wife," he said. His assistant swallowed. "She has a marriage certificate, sir. And she says she's been looking for you for 11 years. If you're still here, drop a fire in the comments right now, because part 3 is where everything explodes, and trust me, you are not ready for that ending." David Harrington had built his entire life on control. Every decision calculated. Every risk measured. Every door locked that needed to be locked. But the woman standing in his lobby had a key he thought he'd buried 11 years ago. Her name was Vanessa Cole. And once, for 14 months, she had been Vanessa Harrington. The marriage had been quiet, fast, and catastrophic. A courthouse ceremony at 29, 2 people who confused intensity for love, and a dissolution that David had paid a very expensive lawyer to make disappear so completely that not even his closest board members knew it had existed. He had not seen her since the morning she walked out of their apartment with a single bag and told him he was incapable of loving anything that couldn't be entered into a spreadsheet. She wasn't entirely wrong. He took the elevator down. Vanessa was standing at reception, composed and immaculate in a grey coat, holding a manila envelope with the stillness of someone who had rehearsed this moment many times. She looked at David when the elevator doors opened and didn't blink. "We need to talk," she said. "We needed to talk 11 years ago," David replied. "You chose a suitcase instead." She placed the envelope on the reception desk and slid it toward him. "I never signed the final dissolution papers, David." A pause that landed like a stone in still water. "Your lawyer filed them anyway." The lobby went very quiet. David picked up the envelope. Opened it. Read it slowly. His expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes did. Something that looked almost like the ground shifting beneath a man who had spent a decade believing he was standing on concrete. "Why now?" he said. "Because you're about to lose this company," Vanessa said simply. "And apparently, so am I. My attorney tells me that as your legal wife, your liabilities are partly mine." She tilted her head. "So before this ship sinks, I'd like a seat at the table." David looked at her for a long moment. "Follow me," he said. 2 floors below that conversation, Maya Jenkins had no idea any of it was happening. She was at her desk, 3 weeks into the job, already outperforming every metric Sandra had set for her 90-day probation. She had restructured a vendor tracking system in her second week that saved the company an estimated $12,000 in duplicated logistics costs. David had received that report on a Friday afternoon and read it twice. But today felt different. The office was quieter than usual. People were speaking in low voices near the elevator banks. Her colleague Dre, who knew everything about everything, had stopped by her desk that morning with coffee and a look on his face she hadn't seen before. "You hear anything?" he asked. "About what?" He glanced toward the executive floor. "Just, keep your head down today." Maya watched him walk away and felt the first cold thread of unease move through her. By 2 o'clock the rumors were moving fast. An emergency board meeting had been called. The company's anchor client contract loss was no longer a secret. People were doing quiet math at their desks, calculating their own vulnerability, measuring the distance between themselves and the door. Maya sat very still and thought about her children. Thought about the 6 miles. Thought about everything she had already survived to get to this desk. And then she did something that nobody, not Dre, not Sandra, not anyone on that floor, expected. She wrote a proposal. In 2 hours. Sharp, dense, and completely unsolicited. A full client recovery strategy, 3 alternative anchor clients she had identified in her first 2 weeks, complete with outreach frameworks, transition timelines, and projected revenue offsets. She had noticed the vulnerability in the company's client concentration before anyone told her to look for it. She had been building this quietly, the same way she had built everything in her life, in the margins, after hours, while everyone else assumed she was just keeping up. She printed it. Walked upstairs. Past Sandra's surprised face. Past the assistant's outstretched hand. She knocked on David Harrington's office door and opened it. She did not expect to find 2 people inside. David was behind his desk. A woman Maya didn't recognize was seated across from him, still in her gray coat, watching the door open with sharp, assessing eyes. Maya stopped. "I'm sorry, I can come back." "Stay," David said. The word came out with a quiet authority that froze her in place. He looked at the folder in her hands. "What is that?" Maya straightened. "Set the folder on his desk. A way out of what you're currently in." Vanessa turned in her chair and looked at Maya with an expression that was impossible to read. David opened the folder. Started reading. The silence stretched for 30 seconds. A full minute. He turned a page. Then another. Then he looked up at Maya with an expression she had never seen on his face before. Not the measured, controlled look of a CEO evaluating an employee. Something rawer than that. Something that made the air in the room feel suddenly different. "How long have you been building this?" he said. "Since my 2nd week." "Why didn't you bring it to Sandra?" Maya held his gaze. "Because it wasn't Sandra's problem to solve." The woman in the gray coat made a small sound that might have been a laugh. David closed the folder slowly. And in that moment, with the company bleeding, a ghost from his past sitting 3 feet away, and a woman he had hired on instinct standing in front of him with the answer in her hands, David Harrington made a decision that had nothing to do with business. "Clear my afternoon," he said quietly. To Maya. Not to his assistant. Not to Vanessa. To Maya. Vanessa stood slowly, buttoned her coat, and picked up her envelope. She looked at Maya one long, final moment, the look of a woman who recognizes something she once had and let go, then walked to the door. She paused with her hand on the frame. "Be careful with him," she said softly. "He doesn't know how to love anything slowly." She left. The office was very quiet. David looked at Maya across the desk. Maya looked back. Neither of them moved. And then his phone rang. He glanced at the screen. His face changed in a way that made Maya's breath catch, something between shock and something she couldn't name. He looked up at her. "It's the client," he said. "The one we lost." A pause. "They want to come back. And they are asking, specifically, to work with whoever restructured our vendor tracking system." They were asking for Maya. She stood there, in the office she had walked 6 miles in the rain to earn the right to stand in, and felt the entire weight of the last 7 months lift off her shoulders all at once. But David didn't reach for the phone yet. He was still looking at her. "Before I answer this," he said slowly, "there's something I need to tell you. Something about why I doubled your offer before you even left the building that day." His jaw tightened slightly. "And why I've been watching you a lot more carefully than any CEO should watch an employee." Maya's heart did something it had no business doing in a professional setting. "Tell me," she said. He opened his mouth. And his assistant burst through the door. "Mr. Harrington." Her voice was breathless. "Vanessa Cole just called a press conference downstairs. She's telling reporters the company has a silent co-owner." A pause. "She's telling them it's her." David went completely still. Maya watched his face, watched the controls snap back into place like armor, and understood in that single moment that whatever he had been about to say to her was now locked behind a wall she had no idea how to reach. He picked up the phone, met her eyes one last time. And the way he looked at her, complicated, conflicted, and devastating, told her everything he hadn't said. This was only the beginning. If this story wrecked you in the best possible way, smash that like button, share this with your girls, and subscribe, because the next story coming to this channel, it will make this one look like a warm-up. You do not want to miss it. I'll see you there, bestie.